So just as with Windows Forms, you can publish a WPF application, and publishing is essentially deploying the application using Click Once. You can publish Click Once applications to a website, to an FTP server, to a network share, or locally. And then the application can be installed from a website, a network share, a local path, or CDs, DVDs. There are two ways to publish an application from inside Visual Studio. You can use the Publish Wizard, and you can use the Publish page of the Project Designer. If you use the Publish Wizard, then the wizard walks you through the steps involved in publishing. You specify where you want the application to be published, you specify whether the application should be available online or offline, you click Finish, and Visual Studio publishes the application. Now, if you've published to a website, then Visual Studio will create a default web page for you. You can, of course, create your own web page to use. And then regardless of where you're installing it from, the application will check for prerequisites and install them if necessary. And unless you've signed the application, the user will get the trust prompt. Basically, the operating system warning the user, I don't know where this application came from, do you? Because if you do and you want to install it, that's fine. But I'm just letting you know, I don't trust it. If the application is available offline, users can run it from the Start menu and they can remove it in the Control panel. If you make it online only, then they'll have to go to the web page to run it every time. The location you publish to is not necessarily the same as the location that users install from. So for example, you might publish to a website or a network share and have users install from there, but you might also publish to a staging website for testing and then copy the files to another website for installation. Or you might publish to a network share for testing and then have users install from a website or a CD. So the publish and install locations can be the same, they can be different. Then there's also a third location, and that's the update location. And that's where the application looks for updates to it, and that may or may not be the same as the publish and install locations. So you might publish to a website, but then use a network share for updates. In our demo, we're going to publish and install and update from the same location, but for a real app, you may or may not. You can use the Publish tab of the Project Designer to configure your deployments. There's a Publish Options dialog box that you can use to change the folder and name of the application. So of course it's going to default to the name of your project, but you might want to use a different application name. You can add a link to a place where users can go for installation support. You can change the defaults for how Visual Studio generates the default web page for web-based installs. And you can also specify prerequisites. Now obviously things like the .NET framework is a prerequisite and you can't really change that, but you might have additional prerequisites. Maybe additional assemblies that you want automatically installed. So you can specify what those prerequisites are and where they should be downloaded from. Now if the application is available online only, then it always uses the latest version. And this of course is one of the reasons why web applications became so popular. You make a change to the web application, you don't have to worry about deploying that update because the next time somebody comes to the website, they automatically run the latest code. A big benefit of Click Once is that you can get that with client applications, as long as you ask for it. By default, installed applications don't check for updates, but you can configure them to. You can have an application check before it starts. You can have it check periodically. And then by default, the user will be prompted to install the updates, unless you require them. And we'll see how to do all of that in the demo. Whether you run the application online or offline, the application's downloaded to the user's computer and it resides in the Click Once cache. And the Click Once cache is a set of hidden folders, and each user has their own cache. And the benefit of this is it maintains application isolation. So every application and every version of every application are in separate folders. Every user has their own Click Once cache. Total isolation. Just as you can have automatic updating, you can also roll back to a previous version. So the application checks something called the deployment manifest, which is an XML file. That's in the install location. And it checks that, and the deployment manifest points to the version of the application to run. So if you copied an earlier version of the deployment manifest which pointed to an earlier version of the application, then you could roll back an update. That's a lot of what you can do. Let's go see how to do all of this. Let's deploy a WPF application using Click Once. The Click Once demo sample application open. Now what I want to do is run this application first so we can see what it does, and then I want to publish it. So I'll run this. Here's the main application. I have two choices. I can see information on courses, and I can select a course in the list and learn a little bit more about it on the bottom. I have navigation buttons so I can go backwards and forwards and select from the navigation history. And then I can also see experts. When I click on an expert, I see more information about that person. So there's the application. It's been tested, it works great. Now it's time to publish it so that users can use it. Two ways I can do that. I can go to Build and select, if I have the project selected, I can go to Build and select Publish Click Once Demo. In the Solution Explorer, I can also right-click on it and select Publish. Both of those will bring up the Publish wizard. And the Publish wizard walks me through the steps of publishing this application. First thing it wants to know is where do I want to publish it? Locally, on a file share, FTP server, website. I'm going to publish this to a website, localhost, and I'll call this Click Once Demo. Now you'll notice that I'm running Visual Studio as administrator. In order to publish to a website, you need to be running as admin. Now I'll click Next. The Publish wizard asks, will this application be available online and offline or just online? If I choose online, then every time the user wants to run the application, they have to go to the website and click the Run button. If I make it available online or offline, then they can go to the website and install it, and then they'll have a shortcut to it in their Start menu. And they can also uninstall it using Add Remove Programs. So I'm going to leave it online and offline. I'll click Next. And then when I click Finish, oh, this is okay. I was practicing with this earlier. This temporary key.pfx is the temporary key for signing this. So I'm going to overwrite that. Visual Studio builds the project and then publishes it and displays for me the publish page. So this is what users will see. They'll go to the website and then go to clickoncedemo/publish.htm, and it tells me this is Click Once Demo version 1.0.0.0. Now I want to install this. If this was online only, this button would say Run, but because it's online offline, the button says Install. So I'll install this, and because I signed this with a temporary key, the publisher's basically not trusted. Publisher cannot be verified. So if you want to see more information on what this means and why this is an issue, I can click More Information. The publisher can't be verified. The application's gaining access to the computer. It's going to be installed. So you get around this security warning by signing the application with a trusted certificate. I don't have one, but I do trust myself, so I'm going to install this. And now here's the application. And it works as before. And when I exit this, I can run it again by going to the Start menu and see there is a Click Once Demo folder with a Click Once Demo icon. with a Click Once Demo shortcut. If I select that, I can run the application again. Now if I want to uninstall this, I can go to the Control Panel, I can go to Programs and Features, and here's Click Once Demo, and if I want to get rid of it, I can click Uninstall. And now I have a choice to remove the application. So I'll do that. And now the shortcut in the Start menu is gone. And if I want to run the application, I need to go back to the website and reinstall it, which I'll do here. Alright, so far so good. So that's basic publishing. But I want to set a few options because Click Once Demo has a name, no publisher. I mean, I know what Click Once Demo is, but I'd like a little bit more user-friendly names here. So I'm going to close the browser and go back into Visual Studio and go into the Project Designer. So I'll select Project, Click Once Demo Properties, and I'm going to go to the Publish tab. Here's the Publishing folder. Here's the version number, and notice that the version number increases every time I publish, and what changes is the revision. So the next time I publish this, it'll be version 1.0.0.1. If I have a more major release, I could update it to 1.1. Notice that that's not the version of the application. The version of the application is set over here in Application, or Assembly Information. Here's the actual application version. This is the publishing version, and they're not necessarily in sync. If I want to change the text that appears on the Publish page, I can go to Options, and I can enter a publisher name. So I'll call this AppDev. I can enter a product name, AppDev Courses. I can give a URL for support, www.appdev.com. I also have some options on deployment. By default, the deployment web page is called publish.htm. I could call it something else. And I can choose whether or not I want to automatically overwrite that every time I publish, and whether I want Visual Studio to open the deployment web page each time I publish. So I'm going to click OK. And I don't need to run the Publish Wizard again because all of the information the Publish Wizard asked me is right here in this page. Publishing location, online, offline. So I guess this is really the third way you could have published. You could come directly into here, go to the Publish page, fill out this information, and then click Publish Now. And certainly the second time I want to publish, I'm just going to publish this again. Visual Studio builds it, publishes it, automatically opens up the install page, and now here's my publisher, here's my application name, and here's the version, and here's the link for support. Now I'll install this. And notice it doesn't ask me again if I want to install it because I said I trust the publisher once. I'm always going to trust it. So now the application is installed, and if I go to my Start menu, now the application occurs in the AppDev folder, and it's called AppDev Courses. And here's the link for online support. So now I can select AppDev Courses and run the application. And that, of course, what did I click? I meant to click the Close button. There we go. And of course, in the Programs and Folders, if I refresh this, it's going to appear now as AppDev Courses. Okay, I'm going to leave it installed for now. What I want to do now is configure the application to automatically check for updates. One of the beauties of Click Once is automatic update checking. So if I click the Updates button, then I can see that by default applications don't check for updates. So this is something to keep in mind, because if you deploy an application and then make a change to it, the originally installed version of the application isn't necessarily going to check for updates. So I'm now going to turn this on, And I have my choice. Should this check for updates before it begins or afterwards? If you want users to always be running the latest version, you'd obviously check before the application starts. If users need to be able to get their work done, and then the next time they're on the application, they should use the new version, then you could choose after the application starts. And if you choose after the application starts, then you can specify how often the application should check for updates. So for example, maybe every Friday there's an update, and you can have it check every Friday. The user runs the application, and then on Monday, they'll have the latest version. I'm going to check before the application starts. I want instant updating. I'll click OK. Now I'm going to republish this as version 1.0.0.2. And I'm going to reinstall it. And now this version that's currently installed is configured to check for updates. So let's make an update. Let's go to the main page. And what I want to do when the user wants to look at experts is I want to use a different version. So the current version it's using of the experts page is this one, but I want to use this new and improved version where it actually shows the experts picture. So all I need to do is come into main page and go into the XAML and call up experts 2. So now I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to rebuild this and publish it again. I actually don't need to rebuild it because when I publish it, Visual Studio will automatically build it. So I'm just going to publish this. Visual Studio builds it, publishes it, shows me the publish page. I'm going to get rid of that. Now watch what happens. The next time the user comes in to use the application will check for updates. A new version's available. Do you want to download it right now? It's optional. I could say no, but of course I want to download it. It's a new version. I click OK, and now here's the new version of the application. Now I can roll this back. There's a couple ways that it can be rolled back. The user can roll this back. So the user could say, oh, I don't like that version. I like the previous version. I don't want to see a picture of green. I just want to read about them. So I'll go to Programs and Features, select this, choose Uninstall Change, and now I'm offered the opportunity to restore the application to its previous state. I click OK, and now the next time I run the application, I'm going to get the previous version. So the users have the option of installing and rolling back updates. We're going to see in a minute or two how we can make them update. But what if we don't want the users to have the choice? What if we want to require them to update the application? Well, we can do that too. Let's go into Updates, and let's say specify a minimum required version for this application. And I'm going to leave it at 4 because that's the next version. Now let's make a change to this. Let's go into the main page. I don't want to move it. Let's go into the main page. And let's bump up the font to 24. Okay. So we've made a change that we want users to have. And so now I'm going to publish. Here's version 1.0.0.4. I'll close this. Watch what happens when the user next goes in to use the application. They're not given any choice. They automatically get the new version, and they have to see my pretty face. So let's see what happens when you publish the application. We've now published this 5 or 6 times, 5 times. Let's go see what happens. So if we go to inetpub, www.root. When we publish this to ClickOne's demo, we created a web application for this. And in here are a bunch of files. ClickOne's demo.application. And here's the publish page, here's setup. So ClickOne's demo.application is the deployment manifest. And the deployment manifest is an XML file that describes the deployment of the application. Each version of the application we publish gets a deployment manifest. This folder here always contains the current version of this file. So this is the 1.0.0.4 version of the deployment manifest. Then also in here is the publish.htm, that's the web page, and then the setup file. And the setup program checks for prerequisites and installs the application. And then in application files is every version of the application we've published, starting at 1.0.0.0 all the way up to 1.0.0.4. And then inside each of these is ClickOne's demo.application, .exe.deploy, and .exe.manifest. So ClickOne's demo.application is the deployment manifest for this particular version. ClickOne's demo.exe.deploy is the executable itself with a .deploy extension on top of it. And then ClickOne's demo.exe.manifest is the application manifest. And this is an XML file that describes the application. And then there could be additional files in here. So for example, if the application used external assemblies, you'd find those in here as well. Let's take a quick look at the manifests. Let's open up the deployment manifest. I'm going to open this with, and I'm going to select Notepad, and then I'm going to uncheck always use the selected program to open this kind of file. So actually this is kind of dangerous. If we set this to open with Notepad, we could potentially break the ability to install this. So I want to open this with Notepad for now. There it is. Okay, so here's the application manifest. So we see that the assembly is ClickOne's demo.application version 1.0.0.4. Let's put word wrap on here, so there we go. Okay, so we see the assembly identity name, we see the version, we see the publisher, we see the product. Here's the support URL. Minimum required version 1.0.0.4. Check for updates before the application startup. Requires the .NET Framework 4, at least version 4.0.30319. This is the version this was created with. Where's the application manifest? It's ClickOne's demo.exe.manifest. Here's the assembly, ClickOne's demo.exe. That's, in a nutshell, is the deployment manifest. That is information about the deployment. Let's look at the application manifest. Let's open this, and let's open this with Notepad. This is also XML. This is information about the application. Here's the assembly identity, ClickOne's demo.exe. Here's the assembly, which is version 1.0.0.0 of the actual assembly. Operating system version 5.1, build number 2600. That's Windows 7. What does this depend on? The Common Language Runtime, of course. Here's the assembly. So these two XML files tell us everything we need to know about the deployment and about the application itself. And then again, if we go back out to here, this deployment manifest, let's open it with Notepad, says that the current version of this is 1.0.0.4, which, by the way, is the minimum required version. Now, because everything's here, you can do an administrative rollback. Let's try and roll this back to version 1.0.0.3. So I'm going to go into Application Files, the 1003 folder, and I'm going to take the deployment manifest, and I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go back to the root folder, and I'm going to paste the old version in. So go back to the older version. Now, watch what happens when I try and run this. Can't do it. Application cannot be started. Contact the application vendor, which is pretty scary, but if we look in details, cannot activate a deployment with earlier version than the current minimum required version of the application. So in other words, don't do that. So I can't roll back an application to a version before the minimum required version. So let's go back into Visual Studio. And I'm going to leave this minimum required version. That's not the one. I'm going to leave the minimum required version set at 1004, and I'm going to publish a new version. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this main page because I made the font too big. I set it to 24. You can't read that, so let's change it to 18. Okay, now I'm going to publish this. I don't need the publish page because the application's already installed. Now when I open the application, a new version's available, and I get prompted because this is a version that's greater than the minimum version. So now we're back to asking the user. So if you want every update to automatically, mandatorily be installed, then you would keep the minimum required version in sync with the version. So now let's install this, and now I've got the better looking font. Well, now as the administrator, I decide, oh no, we have to roll this back. There's a problem with that. So now I go in here. This is now the 10.0.05 version. So now I'll go into the 10.04 version, grab the deployment manifest that says run the version 4, come back in here, overwrite this, and now next time I run this, a new version is available. Do you want to download it? Yes. And we go back to the previous version. So if you want to force users to always install the latest version, then you keep the minimum version number in sync with the current published version. If you then need to roll something back, then you're going to have to republish. And you're going to have to republish and take out the existing changes. If the published version is greater than the minimum required version, then you revert back to prompting the users if they want to install. And then you can manually roll back by copying the deployment manifest over. If we now want to roll forward, we can just come back into the 10.05 folder, get the deployment manifest, copy it back into the root folder, and now once again, the next time the user runs this, a new update's available. Do you want it? Of course I do. And we're back to the 1.0.0.5 version of this application. And if you've used ClickOnce before with WinForms, this is all familiar to you because ClickOnce works with WPF the same way it works with WinForms.